Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing the episode titled Extras. Now we kick off this review, as I often do with these reviews, by talking about the positives, all the things I enjoyed about this episode in some way, shape or form. And the headline positives for this particular episode is this was a fine connective tissue episode. The various different scenes and snapshots that we got of people saving the day in their particular groups was good. It felt more significant than similar scenes we've had in previous weeks, and the big confrontation battle between All For One towards the end of the episode was interesting. Granted, saying that the fight was just interesting doesn't sound like the most ringing of endorsements, but I'll discuss in greater detail what I thought about that scene in greater detail later on. Now, I suppose that for an episode like this we should tackle it in a somewhat linear fashion, but knackers to it, we're gonna go semi-linear, baby! We'll start off by talking about this scene with the group at the facility holding Gigantinonomicus. I can never say their name, I can never remember their name, so we'll just cope with it. This team has been sent there to make sure the villains wouldn't be able to wake up Gigantinonomicus anytime soon. From what we understand and what has been said, they've basically been hiding in wait, ready to ambush the villains when they started to go near it. They were under the impression, quite correctly, that pretty much as soon as all this stuff was going to start kicking off, they'd try and use the destruction and the distraction of everything that's going on to wake up Gigantinonomicus and just to use their raw power for All For One's sinister evil ends. And yeah, they were right about that, and they were hiding away in the sidelines, just waiting for everything to kick off. And I have to say is that this facility thing seems like less of a facility and just more like a big hangar, or more of a big garage that they just stuck Gigantinonomicus into. They could have just really dug a really deep hole and just fed him weird tasting cucumbers for here forever on. A good 10 holes right back points if you get that literary reference. Again, the villains weren't expecting this kind of level of resistance. They were probably expecting only a few guards, and now we have a whole host of heroes trying to stop and fight them back, which is good. But of course, you know for the sake of drama that this resistance is going to last for much longer. That sooner or later one of them's going to get the drop on them, and they're going to wake up Gigantinonomicus, and then they're going to be out causing havoc and causing pain and such. I suppose that it makes sense that that's probably going to happen for no other reason by the simple fact that we have Kirishima and Ishido there, both who have a personal history with Gigantinonomicus, so you know where all that's going to end up going in the end of it. However, the way that things are set up this week, Ishido is going to end up having her big final confrontation with the people who murdered Midnight a few months ago, and for Kirishima, he's going to end up having his big fight with Gigantinonomicus. Whether or not it'll be just him soloing it or what, don't know at this point, but it'd be interesting to see where all that goes later on. Yes, it sounds a little bit cynical for me to say that, where I can pretty much just map out the direction of while this whole series of events is probably going to end up going, but hey, we have possibly a year and a half before all of this stuff ends up wrapping out, so at this point we are setting up our stalls, we're pretty much planning out where things are going to end up going, and I get the feeling that that whole series of events, having Ishido fighting the guys that murdered Midnight and Kirishima fighting Gigantinonomicus, those are the things that have the most emotional weight for those two characters, and it feels like something that they need to help round off their character arcs and their direction and their entire history within this particular series. I'll give them credit, though, for certainly setting it up well ahead of time. And the truth is, however, that I can't really comment it on one way or the other because we are just so early into all of it. I mean, you know, to borrow a phrase I just used, we aren't really setting out our stall here. At this point, we're more getting the paperwork, considering getting a stall. We're not even at the buying of the stall stage yet. It's just setting out, okay, this person's going to fight these people, that person's going to fight those people, and that's pretty much the weight of things. We'll see exactly how things end up washing out in the future, but for the here and now, it is just a case of this is a thing that will probably end up happening in the future, and Gigantinonomicus coming out of his thing going, rah! It will be a great thing to have as a mid-season or end-of-season, oh crap, hangover kind of thing. Not hangover, a cliffhanger, I mean. And of course, in this episode, we get our second unique villain of the arc. I suppose the guy with the gas mask that was making his big speech thing to Ishido earlier in the episode, or later, I don't know, I'm doing this unlinearly. I think he would constitute the first unique villain of this particular arc. The second one would end up being, of course, the Rose guy, the weird scarecrow-looking Rose guy. I suppose he couldn't find anyone that was more thematically appropriate for Aaoyama to fight, so they created a new one. one, which is fine, no worries. I'm sure that their character will be an interesting foil for them in the not-too-distant future, and their big battle between the two of them will be great, engaging, emotionally engaging, and, you know, just on a sheer thrilling spectacle kind of thing. They are a villain who can summon large, creepy, spooky roses that can grow out of seemingly anything, even other human beings, which creates a rather nasty, semi-body horror kind of visual image. And we even see that here and there. We actually see some of the roses growing out of Fat Gum's back, which is just a rather nasty visual. But hey ho, we're at that point in the series yet again. Granted, it doesn't quite hold a candle to some of the body horror stuff that I've seen thus far in Vigilantes, but that's a review series for a whole other time. I will say is that whilst I'm okay with the idea of just creating an original villain for Aaoyama to have his big fight with, I do find the design of this guy a little bit too busy. Sure, maybe in the manga it looked a little bit better, but in the form of animation it just looks a little bit too busy. This whole kind of faux scarecrow look to him just doesn't kind of work. Maybe just change the colours here and there, it would have been a little bit better. Take the more straw-like bit and just make it more of a light purple or something. That probably would have fit in a little bit better. But hey-ho, it's fine. We'll probably see more of them in the coming weeks and months as Aaoyama eventually builds up to defeating them or gets defeated by them. We'll soon see. Towards the start of the episode, we get a flashback to last week, plus a few extra details here and there. And then we get the spooky tease that Denki isn't out to the count. Ooh! I mean, yeah, that's pretty much what we all knew was going to happen. Look, I haven't had this stuff spoilt for me, and I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I think we have to say, if we're being perfectly honest, that the moment I saw Denki go down in one punch, man, I realised that, yeah, this isn't going to be the end of it. I mean, sure, I would have been satisfied had he actually, you know, been defeated in that one particular episode, but, you know, a character that significant isn't going to go down without a fight. He's not going to go down in just one confrontation and one punch. Of course, this means that his quirk's awakening. Ooh, he's going a level beyond, everybody. Hold on to your butts. Through the power of unquenchable revenge, rage, and anime bullshit, he's getting ready for having his next big fight with Shoto at some point in the not-too-distant future. Maybe this will be the halfway through the season, mid-season break teaser thing, or to end the end of the season. Who knows? It does feel like it's setting up for some kind of bigger thing later on, because let's face it, a character like that, as I say, was never going to go down in one confrontation. There probably will be another fight with him in the not-too-distant future, and we'll see how all that ends up washing out as we end up going forward with it. Of course, we also have the matter of the UA plotters too, those brief scenes that we saw a few weeks ago of people planning to do some kind of invasion of some description into UA's facility, which will probably end up coming into greater focus in the coming weeks and months, but in the meantime it's still out in the open, or rather out in the shadows or something. Sorry, I'm getting my metaphors mixed up, but you get the idea. It's just on the back burner for the time being. One thing that I did enjoy, however, was being able to see the aftermath of the fight, just seeing the heroes realising that Dabi has gone down, and suddenly having them getting their second wind and just starting to wallop the villains even more so. I think the only thing that would have made that whole sequence of events just a little bit better will be if we got more of a response from the villains. Even just a quick thing than going, "Oh, fuck!" would have been enough for me. Just a sudden look of panic when they realise that one of their biggest, baddest fighters has suddenly gone down. The closest that we get from any of that kind of stuff is with Spinner, who just ends up thinking it's fake news. Speaking of Spinner, we might as well talk about his contribution to this episode, which is showing that the Heteromorph Rebellion is now in full swing! Or at least we're seeing the opening salvo of it. I will admit I was expecting this to kick off later on in the story, but hey, maybe the reason why it kicked off prematurely within the story is because it was supposed to be a part of something bigger. Like it was supposed to be the distraction as part of the mission to liberate Gigantonomachus, and then, you know, all this stuff with everyone getting split up kicked off, but hey-ho, that's speculation for another time. Not really going to get myself lost in the reeds of speculating on other timelines and stuff in the here and now. Spinner has been given a second quirk, one which makes him big but large huge. Yes, he's taller and stronger, but now he's slower and the worst possible person to sit behind in the cinema. Look, I know that he's supposed to be young and naive, but doesn't he realise that if this whole rebellion thing fails, it's going to make life hell for the heteromorphs in Japan for years, if not decades to come? Yeah, sure, hashtag not all heteromorphs, but if he thinks that people are suspicious and hostile towards them now, then oh boy, he's only gonna get like hell if all this ends up failing for him. But hey, at least the Meta Liberation Army will get a whole host of new members, which, yeah, that's going to be a nightmare to deal with after the fact. Oh no. Anyway, speaking of nightmarish scenarios, it's time to talk about the big battle between Endeavour, Hawks and All For One, and how it's going pretty much the way that I expected. Look, we all know that this isn't going to be the big final battle with All For One. That was pretty much a guarantee from the moment that it was said that these were the people that were going to end up fighting him. We all know how stories like this go, so unless All For One does some kind of body swap thing with Tomura early, there isn't likely to end up being Endeavour saving the day here, but hell, he might still be able to hold on and keep the fight going long enough that Midoriya can show up to have his big final confrontation with him, but we'll soon see about that. The thing that I really liked about it isn't so much the action itself, which I thought was good for what it was. I thought the creativity in the animation, particularly when Endeavour was using his big fiery fist thing, was cool and interesting, and seeing All For One using some of these weirder, stranger, esoteric-looking quirks was, again, cool and interesting for what it was. Really thrilling, exciting stuff. But the thing that I really liked about this scene was just the sheer sinister, twisted, dark side of All For One's nature and just how he brings that to the fold. We don't really see him in this almost... this way that he revels in being the villain. Whenever we end up seeing him, he's just with him... scheming, just with him making enigmatic, mysterious comments in the dark, and when the rare moments we do get to see him actually being the villain and being taunting and being nasty and getting under people's skin, I really like that. I really like the way that he's pressing Endeavour's buttons and really getting him wound up. Seemingly just to try and make him make some kind of mistake and to make him open himself up to an attack, which, to be fair, given the sheer gulf of power potentially between the two of them, I don't think he really needs to do that. They're really banking on this whole thing about destroying his mask and destroying his respirator thing, which, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think that it's going to work. Even if they can't smash it off him, I get the feeling he's just going to turn around and say, oh no, I've overcome that weakness, or I have a quirk that lets me survive without it, or at the very least he'll turn around and say, oh no, don't worry, I'm good for another 2, 3, 4 hours, maybe 4 hours at a push, because I'm going to be fighting you suckers, or something like that. I can see something like that end up happening, but the thing that I really liked about that confrontation, the thing that I just went, wow, that's a cool moment, is the bit where that weird, like, chompy monster thing is all canon, and whatever it's supposed to be, he's about to go and attack the students, and he just ends up saying, oh, you thought this was an extension of school, or a line to that effect, and I just really like that, because beyond the fact it's a well-written line, I think it has a beautiful, dramatic, villainous impact. It just really underlines just how many of the students are treating all of this. They're just practically treating this like, oh, it's part of their exams and it's part of their education, and there is very much the, oh shucks guy, we're gonna beat those hecking nasty villains and we're gonna save the day through the power of friendship. And now the reality of it's kicking home and they're getting mutilated left and right. Alright, maybe not mutilated, but they are getting really nastily shook up and torn about, and this is only their first few seconds fighting him. Like, the reality that they're really critically out of their depth is something that's only going to start hitting home for them as the tide starts to turn against them, which really creates for some great dramatic moments, so it ends up, you know, creating for some rather dark and, oh no, not that person, don't kill that person, I like them kind of stuff, but we'll see when that all ends up going with that. So I will point out, and this isn't a negative or anything, but it did kind of make me laugh in almost like a dark and twisted ways, that we get the little zoom shot of what's happening on the ground underneath the fight between All For One and Endeavour. And, you know, it's the kind of thing of we see the heroes and the villains fighting. But I noticed that the kid that has, like, the shroom powers from Class 1, 2, or 2A, or whatever it is down there. And I'm just thinking to myself is that, you know, for a big fight with this, they're fighting All For One, they're fighting the biggest, nastiest villain of them all. You'd want all the super big, super powerful heavy hitters being down there. And they got the kid that could just summon mushrooms. They look so out of place to everything that's going on. It's like they've been brought in from a different program. Like they got the wrong animation cell and they loaded in. Or paperwork got mixed up and they thought, okay, we here are all the designs for the background characters, and a character from a different series' paperwork got mixed up in it. We'll put them in. Oh, Christ. You know, maybe they'll have a big super powered moment, because I remember them having some kind of big super ability in a couple of seasons back, so maybe that'll come into the swing of things. Or maybe she's got that weird creepy fungus that controls people's minds that you see being used a lot in fiction, like that, what is it, All of Us, Last of Us, or whatever it is. That's a factor that maybe she starts using that. Who knows? We'll soon see. Anyway, pivot on from something dark and twisted to something into the negatives, and not much to talk about here. I know that a lot of people out there are thinking, oh, the negative for this episode is going to be that there was too much happening and the episode felt congested. No. I will be honest. No, wait, I'll save that for the overview. I think that my negative for this episode is the fact I don't think that they needed the recap at the start of the episode. I don't think it was needed at all. As, quite honestly, well, even when you take into consideration that it's been a week since the last episode, it's only been a week. Everyone that watched the episode has already seen that bit, and I don't think that seeing it again really changes anything. I feel as though if we were to have something like that again, it would have been cool to see it from a different angle, a different point of view. Maybe we saw it from Dabi's point of view. Maybe we saw it from one of the little henchman villains' point of view. Maybe we saw it from one of the heroes' point of view. Maybe we just saw it in the big conference centre thing that All Might's in. Well, not conference centre, you get the idea. He's in the command centre, and you've got the different police officers and military leaders around him. Maybe we could have seen it from their point of view. That would be interesting. Maybe some of them are having second thoughts about the plan. Maybe some of them are thinking, oh yeah, these are going to win here. Or maybe one of them wants to Shoto to really go in for the kill and finish him off once and for all. Just something like that would have been interesting. But we don't end up getting that. It is just a straight recap of here are the clips from last week's episode, and maybe they've been edited down to help expedite it to make it fit in the pre-titled sequence. I don't know, but it feels like a missed opportunity to do something interesting, or a little bit more interesting than what we got. With that said, however, let us get into the overview, and I think that this is a very solid, very good episode. I know that saying very good is maybe not becoming of someone that has a qualification in writing, but still, you get the idea. It's a solid episode for what it is, and it is good. There's no getting away around that fact. Yes, I did kind of tease upon the fact that I don't think that this episode felt too congested. I will admit there were some moments where it felt as though they were fitting too much in at once, but I still think that it manages to pull it off because enough was happening in the scenes that were taking part. It wasn't just a case of here's a little bit here, here's a little bit there, here's a little bit there. Everything that we ended up seeing, no matter how long and short, felt as though it was using the time effectively. It was setting up for things that will come further down the line in future weeks and months, or it was elaborating on stuff that we needed to know in those immediate scenes. It wasn't a case of, oh, let us check up on Bakugo, let us check up on Ochako, let us check up on Aaoyama, let's check up on Ashida, and just snap, 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 snap. It wasn't. There was a lot more significant things that will end up happening there. Next week we'll end up seeing where we end up going this. It looks like from the preview, from what it'll end up seeing of it, that we're going to continue on with a split focus thing, but I think the focus is going to pivot a little bit more to Endeavour. It's probably going to end up being a thing of like the first 5 or 10 minutes is going to be showing Bakugo and that doing stuff, and then it's going to pivot harder into Endeavour. I don't know, but either way, there's one thing that I do know, and that's that it's time for Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. I still don't have a jingle, so I'll improvise. Our first comment comes from Big X1, who said, I like last week's episode, but this week's episode knocks it out of the park, and one of my favourites ever. This, of course, referring to last week's episode, 2 Fire Flashes, which, yes, I think that was a spectacular episode, and is easily the strongest episode of this year's series thus far. Whether or not I'll consider it as one of the all-time greats, I don't know. I'm kind of overdue a rewatch of the previous seasons. I'll probably end up getting time to end up doing that once this season is over. We'll soon see about that. Our next comment comes from Scott TV Gamer, who ends up saying, hey y'all, Scott here, reference. Now, I'm not going to read the whole comment, and we are going to discuss the comment somewhat non-linearly. First of all, they talk about the fact that Toya didn't fully burn down the facility that they were kept in when we saw them in the flashback sequence. Mr. Sunny was blamed for it, and had it burnt down even further, it would have risked exposing Dr. Warcrimes' secret experiments. We then kick towards the tail end of the comment where they talk about the character Nine, who was a character in one of the movies, and they talk about how they weren't a vessel or intended to be a vessel for All for One. They were just more of an experiment as to try and understand as to how to transfer quirks and such. Now, the second point is one that I'll actually read out because, you know, they mark it as very important, and I think it's really interesting. So, they say, next one is very important. An important panel was cut back in the Overhaul arc, which showed a young Overhaul thinking about the origins of quirks, which he theorised to come from mice, hence he viewing them as being a disease. That's interesting, though. What isn't explicitly said, but may as well be confirmed, is that he appears to be in the same facility Toya woke up in. He was one of the many spares and potentially a vessel for All for One. Some believe that he may have escaped during the fire, being found and taken in by the Yakuza leader later, which I find to be really interesting. The idea that Overhaul might have actually been a potential successor for All for One is just... I really like the idea. There's a part of me that is... Because I've started to do these what-if things like every now and again, and there's a part of me that wants to consider doing that as another one as well, but... Oh, wow, that's a fantastic, but at the same time really creepy idea that he could have ended up being a potential... successor for him. Wow. But anyway, that's a thing to have nightmares about later. Thank you for your comment, of course. By all means, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought about this particular episode. If you've got any thoughts, feelings, or things you want to add, let me know, and you'll be read out in a future show. But between then and now, I say thank you all for listening, thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!